Well, Senator Scott is making some striking claims that need context. First, he's making the claim that President Biden is behind the New York prosecution of former President Trump as a way to keep Trump tied up in court.
What Biden's got to try to do is try to silence Trump, and that's what he's trying to do right now.
Now, in making that claim, Scott notes the Manhattan judge has supported Democrats in the past, as has his family, as has the prosecutor's family. And he notes the DA hired a former colleague of his back in 2022 who had worked in the Biden Justice Department, though there is no evidence President Biden played any part in that hire or the New York prosecution in general.
So it's all just pure Biden Justice Department persecution of Trump.
And Scott then pivots to himself, claiming that he knows something about legal persecution because he was persecuted by the Clinton administration.
I was the lead opponent of Hillary Care.
Well, he's referring there to a time when Hillary Clinton was First Lady and chaired a task force on health care reform. Scott was an outspoken critic of the proposals, along with many, many others. And Scott now claims the Clinton administration targeted him for his opposition to Clinton's health care proposals, and that First Lady Hillary Clinton retaliated by getting the feds to go after his hospital company for fraud.
She used the Clinton Justice Department and went after me.
Now, we reviewed years of Scott's prior statements and found no record of Scott making this claim of persecution in years past. In fact, for years, Scott repeatedly said his former company made mistakes and that he took responsibility for them. Well, for background, in the 1990s, Scott led a hospital chain called Columbia HCA that committed what was, at the time, record Medicare fraud on Scott's watch. And one of his former employees, John Schilling, who said he's a Republican, blew the whistle.
And I uncovered that the company was keeping two sets of books. One, that they would file with the Medicare program. That second cost report that they kept for internal purposes was also stamped confidential, or sometimes even stamped do not show to Medicare auditors.
Scott's company overbilled the government, admitted guilt, and paid $1.7 billion for it. Scott resigned in 1997, 4 months into the federal probe, and when he first ran for governor in 2010, this came up over and over again, including our Fox 13 debate.
You did oversee the greatest fraud in American history. You were responsible for that. You either were incompetent running that company or you were aware of it.
14 years later, Scott now claims a third option, that he was a target of baseless persecution. But again, that's not what he said back then.
I take responsibility.
In our debate and elsewhere, he took responsibility for it. And on his website, he noted, "I've made mistakes in my life, and mistakes were certainly made at Columbia HCA. I was the CEO of the company, and as CEO, he accepted responsibility for what happened on his watch." He states, "I learned very hard lessons from what happened."
What could we have done better? We could have hired more auditors, internal, external auditors. And that's what I should have done, and that's what I learned.
Which shows how Scott now has a very different take on what happened back then.
That happened to you, though? That was unfair. That happened to you in the 90s when HCA Columbia got fined, that record fine.
Absolutely.
And while Scott claims the Clinton administration persecuted him by going after his company, the federal investigation played out through two administrations, one run by Democrats and the other by Republicans. Here's the Justice Department's press release. It states, "Largest healthcare fraud case in U.S. history settled. HCA investigation nets record total of $1.7 billion. And notice the date, June of 2003, more than 2 years into the Bush administration. All context for Senator Scott's claims today as he runs for re-election in the mix of money, power, and politics.